a little bit long. Hey, what's going on YouTube? Son of Sanguinius here, and in this video we're going to be continuing on looking at some of these new articles that GW has posted up on the Warhammer community website. As always, I will be posting links to these articles in the video description below. And so in this video we're going to be talking about the shooting phase, the charge phase, and the fight phase. This video is probably going to be a little bit longer simply because there's a lot for me to cover, but I feel like talking about the charge phase, I gotta talk about the fight phase because there's relevant information, and shooting and assault are kind of intertwined in this sort of debate as to whether or not assault armies will be on par with shooting armies in 8th edition. So without further ado, let's just dive right in, starting with shooting. So this article starts with, "It's a big one today, folks, as we take a closer look at the shooting phase. This phase will be very familiar to anyone who plays today, but there have been a few tweaks and improvements to the rules. We've already seen the profiles of our miniatures, so we know that we'll be hitting on a fixed ballistic skill, a bit like you do now. And we've also seen a little how the weapons work, multiple damage from powerful weapons and armor save modifiers, for example. Today we look at some of the other rules of the phase. When you select a unit to shoot, much like today, they can fire all their weapons at the enemy. You can't shoot, however, if you advance this turn or if you fail back from combat, so again, all that we already knew. And this is interesting. You also can't shoot if there is an enemy model within 1 inch of you. The exception to this rule is pistols. Models with these handheld firearms can shoot at the closest enemy target in the shooting phase, even if they themselves are locked in combat. This is going to make characters with pistols, cough, cipher, cough, incredibly deadly up close." So already we're kind of seeing some benefits to a really close range assaulty army, because now your assault marines, your death company, well, probably not sanguinary guard because Angelus bolt guns are not pistols, but essentially any of your guys with pistols, your sergeant on your tactical squad, whatever, they can fire their pistols within 1 inch of the enemy, and even if they're locked in combat, they can fire their pistols in the shooting phase. So that is really, really cool. That's interesting, and I like that idea. So it goes on to say, when picking a target, you won't be able to shoot enemies that are in combat with other units, much like the current edition. However, you can fall back from your combat in your movement phase, allowing other units to fire at your opponent at the expense of your own actions this turn. Expect to see cunning generals deploying their armies in waves to take full advantage of this. Heavy weapons are worth talking about too. These no longer snap fire if you move, and instead they have a flat -1 to hit modifier for moving units. This applies to all models with heavy weapons, vehicles included. There are a few other factors that affect hit rolls as well. Smoke launchers on a vehicle, for example, have the same -1 to hit. The last big change we're doing, or the last big change we're going to cover today is cover. Currently, cover saves give a blanket save to all units, and one that only comes into effect if the shot would otherwise ignore their armor. In the new Warhammer 40,000, cover is a bonus to your armor save. Critically, this ability often only applies to certain types of units. For example, only infantry gain the cover bonus from a crater. This interaction works quite nicely with the modifiers to armor saves of certain guns, and means that when someone is trying to hide behind a wall or barricade, if your weapon has high enough armor penetration, you can shoot them through a wall. Just finishing up the article here, there are also a few weapons that ignore cover bonuses to armor, such as those wielded by Chaos Noise Marines and a Leman Russ's Nova Cannon. There you have it, a few changes you can look forward to in the shooting phase. We'll be back tomorrow with the charge phase. So, a lot to cover here. So, heavy weapons, they no longer snap shoot. They just have a -1 to hit modifier. So that's a big thing, especially considering like how we've built our armies in 7th edition. I tended to lean towards, as I mentioned in my Tactical Squad video when I play my Blood Angels, I tend to go for Heavy Flamer and Melt-A-Gun simply because they're both assault. I can fire them both and still get the charge off, so We again, we're seeing some nice things here, and of course the thing that sucks with heavy weapons like missile launchers and heavy bolters is in this current edition, if you move them, they got a snap shoot, and it's just not that conducive to being effective on the tabletop. Now, however, they have a -1 to hit modifier, so I feel like that's okay. I still. It makes sense in the context of Marines. I feel like a Marine would probably be able to run with a heavy bolter and still be able to lay down some semi-accurate shots. The only question in my mind is, all right, well, what if you're talking about guardsmen trying to run with a las cannon or a heavy bolter or something like that? In that sense, it doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of sense to me. But again, it's nice to see that they're trying to give heavy weapons a boost here. And frankly, almost every army can sort of take advantage of that, so I'm okay with that. So they also mentioned something that we've already kind of predicted before, that cover is going to modify your armor save. So there aren't necessarily going to be cover saves, quote unquote, but there will be a system in place where if you're behind sandbags, if you're in a crater, you're going to get a cover save. Of course, some covers will only affect certain units. They give the example of the crater only affecting infantry and not vehicles, so that makes sense to me. It sounds really cool, and I'm looking forward to it. They also mentioned that there will be a few weapons that can ignore bonuses by cover to armor save, so that's, again, makes sense. That's awesome. The specific example is Chaos Noise Marines and Lehman Russ's Nova Cannon. So, again, these are things that we kind of expected, but it's nice to see GW confirming here. And overall, I'm fairly pleased with what they had to say here, especially concerning pistols being able to be shot at the closest enemy unit when you're locked in combat. That's a nice buff for Assault Marines, Death Company, any kind of Vanguard vets, any kind of close combat unit that has pistols and close combat weapons. So now we move on to the charge phase. This article says, we've heard about movement, psychic powers, and shooting. Today we look at the charge phase. Charging in Warhammer 40,000 is how you get your units into close combat, to use all those awesome-looking exotic weapons to hack, slash, and otherwise obliterate enemies. The basic mechanic of this phase are very similar to how they work now. Excuse me. You can select any unit within 12 inches as the target of your charge, and your units will move towards them 2d6. Enemy units still have a chance to hit the charging unit with Overwatch, provided that they are not already locked in combat. Just as in the current edition, Overwatch is a hit on a flat 6. All pretty familiar so far. In the current Warhammer 40,000, you need to reach base contact. In the new edition, though, you only need to come within 1 inch of an enemy, which in practice means that compared to the current charge range, you get an extra inch. You also can't move within 1 inches of an enemy that you didn't declare as the target of your charge, so if you want to engage multiple units, you'll need to brave the Overwatch fire of all of them. Overwatch can also be fired multiple times per phase, but as soon as the unit is engaged, they will no longer be able to fire back. So the charge phase keeps most of its current mechanics with only minor amendments. Tomorrow we'll check back in on the fight phase, where we look at the bloody melee in the 41st millennium. So, a lot of people were kind of bummed, especially at the multiple Overwatches being able to be fired unless a unit is stuck in combat. However, the extra inch, so to speak, that is having to only be within 1 inch of an enemy unit to sort of lock them in combat, is a nice change. I kind of wish the 2d6 on a charge could be a little bit more modified, a little bit more malleable for assault units who actually get there. But regardless, there was some disappointment with this announcement, as people were really expecting there to be some real nice buffs to close combat armies. So I think now we should move on to the fight phase, because this, I think, kind of ties into the charge phase article nicely, and it sort of gives some nice clarity and some nice context that we can expect the assault to take in 8th edition. So, the fight phase article starts by saying, let's get down to the best phase, combat, unless you're a fire warrior, sorry. This is part of the new Warhammer 40,000 with some of the biggest changes. You've already seen in our article on unit profiles that initiative has gone. Instead, the priority for striking is based on the previous phase, with those units that completed the charge swinging first. There's a definite emphasis on making charging into combat effective. These units have gotten all the way across the battlefield. They braved enemy fire in Overwatch, and now they finally made it into combat. They will, at the very least, get to swing. Units that activate gain a free 3-inch move towards the closest enemy. This can be used to get within 1 inch of other enemy units if you're cunning, dragging more forces into the melee and preventing them from shooting next turn, even if you didn't charge them directly, giving them no chance to overwatch. Enemy gun lines will need to be careful about how they position their supporting units so as to avoid getting dragged into the fight too. So this is kind of a big thing, because this means that you basically get a free 3-inch move toward the closest enemy. But there's a way to just sort of have your unit just kind of tail off to the left a little bit, tail off to the right, and you can sort of drag. If your opponent has set up this huge gun line, assuming you do get a charge in, you can not only drag the unit you charged into combat, but also the guy standing next to him, and maybe even the guy behind him as well. So again, we're seeing some big changes here, and this, I think, will be what sort of sets up the assault to be a much more viable and much more powerful tactic in 8th edition. So moving on, it says, following chargers, players take it in turns to activate units across the board to fight. This can get quite tactical, as both players need to choose the combats where dealing multiple damage will be important to them, while trying to limit enemy retaliation on their valuable or fragile models. So again, another thing we're seeing here, it's not a simple, we just go through each of the combats, and then you swing, then I swing, okay, move on to this combat, you swing, then I swing. It's not that. It's variable activation, which will be quite interesting to see, because since they've done away with that initiative system now, it means that deciding who or what swings first will make the difference. But of course, assuming that we will be the ones assaulting here, the assaulting army will definitely have the advantage when it comes to this, as all units that charged during that turn will be able to swing first. And then from there, you sort of move on to the other combats, and it's an alternate activating thing. So, again, a nice buff to assault armies. So it moves on to say there are a few units that can interrupt the sequence to attack out of turn 2. Tyranids with Lash Whips and Slaaneshi Demons, for example, and can be influenced by stratagems. More on these soon. If your army is Battleforged, all of which add a nuanced level of tactical depth to the phase. So it is nice because in the previous, I suppose in this current edition, I guess, Lash Whips basically added +3 to your initiative, only in the combat phase, when you charge, basically. So it's nice to see that, the Lash Whips, you can actually, attack out of phase, and Slaaneshi Demons too. So it'll be really cool to see the kind of units that are actually able to do that. So who knows? Maybe one of our Blood Angel units will be able to do that, or maybe we'll have a stratagem that allows us to, get another attack in. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see. So, moving on, it says players will have much more influence over the outcome of combat now, rather than purely the stats of the models involved, both in their own and in their opponent's turns, though we still wouldn't expect Guardsmen to triumph over a unit of Khorne Berserkers anytime soon. Fix bayonets. Another thing we have seen is that hit rolls are now fixed. This has the effect of making dedicated combat units generally hit on a 3+, while models representing the most competent warriors of the 41st millennium, Guilliman the Swarmlord, Ghazghkull Thraka, to name but a few, will hit on a 2+. So again, we're seeing that old to hit chart for the assault phase in this current edition being tossed out the window, and instead now we have fixed to hit values. This is awesome. And they also mentioned that, hey, some of the better, close combat units are going to be hitting on a 2+. This is awesome. This means that dedicated assault units will be much more reliable when it comes to close combat, and they will be able to deal much more damage because basically, since we don't have the chart, that means hitting on a 2+ will be possible, and I would guarantee that there will probably be plenty of modifiers, either through stratagems, psychic powers, or whatever else, that there will be a way to go from a 4-up to a 3-up, or in the case of Space Marines, from a 3-up to a 2-up. So, again, pretty exciting there. We'll have to wait and see what happens. Close combat weapons, which we'll take a look at in more detail in the future, also gain new rules. Some will slice through armor easily, while others will hit with enough force to cause multiple wounds that can cripple or kill even powerful enemy models. So it seems like they're kind of hinting at power swords with, slicing their armor easily, and then thunder hammers with the idea of melee weapons causing multiple wounds that can cripple or kill even more powerful enemy models. So again, we'll have to wait and see. I'm very curious to see what the close combat weapons look like. I might make a prediction on that in the future, but we'll have to wait and see. So, finishing up the article here, across the board, these changes lead to combats that are more deadly than ever. Generals who successfully coordinate a battlefield-wide charge will be rewarded with a phase of utter carnage, while their opponent will have to work hard to minimize taking damage and carefully considering retaliatory options. Expect combats to be hard-fought, bloody, and tactical, just as they should be. We'll be back tomorrow with some new details on morale, and after we've seen the damage that shooting, psychic powers, and combat do, can you blame anyone for running away? Well, certainly not. So, anyway, guys, that's all I got time for in this video. I know it's been kind of a longer one, but honestly, a lot of interesting stuff here. We'll have, again, as I keep saying, we'll have to see how it all plays out. Obviously, we don't have the full details as we're not looking at the 8th edition rulebook, but so far I'm okay with the things that I've seen so far. It seems like the shooting is going to be strong in this edition, but the assault, I think, has some things going for it, especially if dedicated assault units will be hitting on a 3+ or a 2+ now. That just means that they're more deadly, and the fact that we can drag other units that we didn't even charge into combat with us is awesome. And sure, the enemy might be able to break away easily, but they sacrifice their advanced shooting and assault. So even if they did break away, in the example that I gave with that line of guardsmen and then the one next to him and the one behind him, assuming we positioned them right and we got all three in a combat, sure, they could break away, but then we could just charge another one and drag the other two in with it again. So I think GW made an excellent statement here. On their Facebook page, someone said, "Oh, well, you can just Congo line the whole thing, and it's going to be bad." And I think this when they talk about how you can sort of drag other units into combat with you is why GW said, "Hey, making a Congo line, making a gun line, so to speak, with your units very close to each other will not be a good idea in this new edition, especially if you're going up against an assault army." So this is very interesting stuff. We'll have to see what GW does in the future. Sure enough, slowly but surely, I'm becoming more and more optimistic about 8th edition. I think GW has taken a lot of our concerns into consideration, and I'm also kind of curious as to whether or not their choice of using that awesome image of Blood Angel Sanguinary Guard for the fight phase is perhaps just a slight nod to us Blood Angels players that the Sons of the Angel will be great again, but we'll have to wait and see. So anyway, I'm very curious to see what you guys have to say down below in the comment section below. Feel free to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.